You've read the rules, you've created your strategies, you've put in the time, you've done the math. Now it's time to show us what you've got. Welcome to this week's episode of FMA Plus. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Bunca here for FMA Plus, and welcome to our special episode. We're actually going to be talking with some really impressive people tonight. I actually have four drive coaches who have experience from Hatboro-Horsham 2020. So they are part of the lucky few who had an opportunity to compete this year in Infinite Recharge. We're going to be talking to them about three specific areas of interest. So our first section will be general strategy and their strategy processes. This is not specific to this season. The next section will be their reflections on playing in Hatboro-Horsham in 2020. And then finally, we'll close out with a section where we talk about moving forward. We've all seen Infinite Recharge to some degree, and we all have heard the very exciting, somewhat controversial first announcement. So we'll be hypothesizing a bit on what the Infinite Recharge experience will look like come the 2021 season. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nate Knaus, Bob Dudek, Mike Lecht, and Chris Gregory. Guys, love to hear a little bit about your experience.
All right, I guess I'll start. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Nate Knaus. I am one of the lead mentors of FRC 2729 Storm Robotics. I guess just a few things. I'm a tech ed teacher, so I teach engineering courses. And my rookie year in first was the year 2000 when I was a member of Team 87 as a student. So a little bit about me.
Good evening, folks. This is Bob Dudek. I'm from 365 Miracle Workers. I've been there since the beginning. In 1999, 2000 was our first year. And I'm a retired DuPont engineer.
I'm Michael Leich. I'm a mentor for 1403, Cougar Robotics out of Skillman, New Jersey. My first year was, or my rookie year as a student was Team 303 out of Bridgewater. And yeah, I'm the drive coach and a lead technical mentor for the team. So.
And I'm Chris Gregory. I'm the head advisor and drive coach for Team 1089, Team Mercury out of Hightstown, New Jersey. My first year was 2003, and I did a little drive coaching then. And then I took some time off from it, and I really started again back in like 2010 or 2011 in that kind of area. And I've been doing it ever since. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us tonight. Let's start off with something a little bit more generic, not so specific to this season. So Nate, maybe you could kick off. Let's talk a little bit about general coaching process.
Yeah, so basically within Storm, and there's lots of different ways to go about coaching a team. I've been doing it for a while now, and every year I do it a different way. It's from learning from the past, thinking about things that you want to do differently, all that kind of stuff. So within Storm Robotics, we have a number of jobs that we try to set students up with when they get to a competition so that really like everybody's participating and everybody's really super engaged with kind of the teamwork and kind of things that are going on within our competition. This year we had 58 students on our team, so we had a lot of jobs, so we got to kind of create some new jobs. So to kind of start, and I know they're up on the screen right now, we have an overarching student director of scouting and strategy, and this is a person and he did a great job this year. He set us up and kind of got coordination going within the students to have a few things, the job set up. We have a scouting app that the team uses every year to record data. Also the flow and kind of how information ultimately gets to the drive team. Then a lot of those jobs that you start to see on the screen there are kind of some of the same jobs you might have on your own team. You have pit scouting. You have scouts who scout matches. This year we had an individual team we had multiple teams of 3 students, so we can kind of get a rotation going with those students, so no one's sitting in the stands all day doing scouting. We're lucky we have a large team and we're able to do that. Now, within our own team, we have what we call a scout master. A scout master is a person who collects data from the students who are actively scouting matches and records that data into a master scouting database. Basically, the numbers all flow into a CSV file. Then we start to get into some of the special jobs that we have within our own team. We have what's called unified scouting reporters. So those unified scouting reporters, more or less, they create quick scouting sheets for our drive team to use and the strategist to use to kind of feed information up to them. So this is where the data starts to kind of hit the road. Then from there, the next job is that we have drive team coordinators. Okay, and within a drive team coordinator, those students receive that unified scouting sheet and they gather members and just kind of coordinate the drive team meeting that, you know, we're all kind of a part of as coaches. From there, we also have kind of rogue, independent, free spirit scouts that we call them. They're kind of people that don't look at counting numbers. They don't look to count kind of how things work. They just watch matches and kind of observe how things go with different teams. Then concurrently to that, we have what we call pick list formulators, people who are looking towards eliminations and kind of looking at how the game's being played and developing pick lists. And then we also have a group of students who go around and check on our alliance members before matches. And then if anything's up with them, any of our alliance members, they might get that information back to us. So all in one picture, it kind of looks like this 4-step process. More or less, there's hit and match scouting. After that, we review the information. We have an alliance strategy meeting. And then the drive team totally has the option, after all that's said and done, to talk over the match with people, with our alliance members in the queue, and rerun kind of what everybody's doing and then execute from there. So that's kind of the whole process there, minus, you know, the technical side of things. We meet as a team before our competitions to go over all these roles, to practice scouting, to practice filling out the sheets, because, you know, you practice the way you play. So that's what we do.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that sounds great. Very similarly, Mo has a process in place, but I wanted to remind folks online that this was week 1 of the 2020 season, and week 1 of every season of First. I've been doing this for 20 years now. Week 1 is definitely a learning cycle, right? No one really knows how the game is going to be played until they have an opportunity to get on a real field with real alliance partners, with an opposition. Yet, as you just outlined, you still have to do scouting, you still have to do pre-match planning, you still have to ensure that all your resources are lined up to prepare your drive team to execute in the match. As you outlined yours, I have a chart that I'd like to throw up to just give one pictorial view of how the Mo team looks at matches or plans for matches. And give a second for that to come up. Don't see it. Yep, there it is. So I didn't want to focus on the green circles there. As you can see, there's a little bit of Mo color in this chart. But you can see that outside of that, those green areas, that's what's typically seen by many teams, right? There's the competition drive teams that are talking with each other. Then there's an agreement as to how you're going to carry out a match. And then there's an execution out in the field. But a lot goes on behind the scenes. And from a Mo standpoint, just as Nate said, we take into account not only our capabilities, but we also take a look at what qualitative and quantitative data we've collected from our scouts. Our scouts, along with pit scouting and some pre-event scouting, especially for teams that have had an opportunity to be in an event beforehand, before the event that we're at, they propose a strategy that goes to our strategist, and the strategist works with our alliance partners to come to some agreement. So a lot happens before we actually show up on the field and execute a match.
Nice. Yeah, I think what's interesting to look at here is, or one of the commonalities I see is, both teams are data driven, right? You guys are not going based off of assumptions or feeling or anything like that, or emotion. It's all based on mathematically what is going to yield the highest probability of success on the field. So let's move a little bit into development of those strategies. So Bob, you talked about all of the moving pieces that come into play, all of the data that's collected by Mo and Nate. You said the same thing about Storm. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you guys actually process that data. How do you take all of that information and convert it into a well executed action plan that is done in a 2-minute 15-second or 2-minute 30-second match?
Go ahead and throw my 2 cents in. So this year we set up actually with combustible lemons. We had a few less students on our team than we typically have, the 40, 45. I think we had about 30, 35 this year. And so we got together with combustible lemons because we recognized that they were in the 2 district events that we were registered for. And so our scouting team contacted them and said, hey, do you want to work together? And they made use of a scouting application. And the in-stand scouting was done by both the Mo team and the combustible lemons, along with pit scouting and then input from our lines partners.
Nice. So Mike, looking at our notes here, it looks like you guys, have a little bit of a different approach when it comes to match strategy development. How does 1403 handle that?
Kind of as a drive coach, I've taken it where I let the drive team and strategy people strategy students take the lead and talking to our alliance partners during the matches and let them kind of develop a plan, let them communicate with the other teams to come up with the best strategy that shows everybody's strengths on the alliance. And sometimes there's disagreement between teams and alliances. So it's one time maybe I'll step in to see where we can persuade and see how we can compromise as an alliance to get to benefit everybody in the alliance. And it's just to give the students that ability to make decisions and stuff. I know that's come from a little bit. I used to be a driver on Team 303 and kind of teaching my students, the ways of doing it, because I know before a match it's hectic and having a pre-check schedule, having all that, making sure that they're focused on what we need to do, going over the matches before going over how we're going to play the match. We're going to pick up the balls here. We're going to shoot from this location and kind of play, navigate the field and where they need to be at what times. And then making sure button checks we do. So making sure the drivers have the right controllers, making sure, kind of the jitters and superstitions to get out of the way of like, hey, I'm going to tap something 3 times to just calm the nerves and be like, all right, I got everything under control now. I'm ready to go. That's kind of important, especially in this game. I know, where was it? Especially at Hatboro with a lot of powerful shooters there. Those balls are flying into that goal and it makes a loud noise. And I know the first couple matches, it got a little chaotic with the drivers where it's just like, oh, wait, what? And like looked up and like, oh, they're shooting balls into our goal. And got us off kilter a little bit. So trying to keep everybody focused on that is, job as a drive coach from my point of view. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Chris, what about 1089? We haven't heard from you yet on this topic.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to say that I think that one of the most important things that you can do with your team is incentivize scouting. We actually give rewards, we give candy, we do like outstanding scouts of the day kind of deal, because we know that sitting in the stands and watching matches can be taxing. And so we kind of bribe our scouts and we get our whole team involved, and we do quantitative and qualitative, and we have an app and all of that stuff. And what's more important is for me is exactly what Mike pointed out, that we make sure that the students are involved and the students are driving the process every step of the way. So the first thing that we do is we do a sit rep on our robot, right? We want to make sure that our robot is fully functioning and we know what we're capable of for a given match. And then of course we need to make sure that we know what our opponents are capable of and our partners are capable of. That's both on data as well as asking our partners, hey, what's the status of your robot? At that point, a lot of times our strategy captains, as well as our strategy mentor, kind of work together and say, well, we think that this is what we should do. And they kind of prep us for what we should bring to the table when we start to talk with the other teams about how they all feel the match should go. So having all that information and all that data prepared does make it a little bit more smooth. So we try to figure out what role is best for which robot, which positions on the field. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we take a look at the game, but where robots will be out on the field. And then what do we do when we need to execute a plan B or a plan C? And so, my job when I'm out on the field at that point is going to be to try to rather than try to tell my driver, go to this spot, is kind of like looking at the overall status of the field and saying, hey, we need to get so-and-so on this robot to play defense here. Or, look, we got 40 seconds left. Let's get ready for climbing. So my job is to try to look at the overall situation and let the kids run the rest of the match. So.
Yeah, so there's not too much micromanaging, right? You're not telling them turn left now or turn right now or reverse or go really fast. It's higher level stuff, which is probably really efficient.
It's called puppeting.
Yeah.
Getting kids involved with the entire process of the decision making and having them drive the whole thing is just, it's empowering. And we're really, really glad to get all that involved.
I also want to make one more comment about something you said, Chris, that I really like, and it's incentivizing scouting. I know I've talked to a couple teams and I've been a part of a couple of operations where scouting is kind of like the afterthought, right? Like it's something like, all right, everybody's focusing on getting the robot running and making sure autonomous looks good and understanding how to drive. And now if you're not one of those people, here's a clipboard and here's a pen and start checking boxes or writing down numbers or telling us what's going on.
So throughout build season, our strategy team actually develops training programs, develops documentation, develops and runs, like I said, runs workshops based upon our app and everything, just to kind of get everybody involved. And we take attendance and who's done what sort of training. And then all the strategy captains will say, this person was always here. They filled in for somebody who missed their scouting role, their scouting slot, and we kind of like super reward them and give them kudos on the bus on the way back and give them candy. And, it's a job. It's a job that needs to be done. But we don't want it to be, we don't want it to be the job that doesn't get recognized, right? Because the drivers always get their recognition, the pit crew gets their recognition, the programmers get their recognition, but we want to make sure that everybody who makes that possible also gets recognition. So we're really proud of that program that we started.
And for good reason, right? I mean, you guys talk about how all of your operations in a competition are data driven, and without scouts, where does that data come from, right? Like this is an important job for anybody or for any team really, and it should be treated as such. So that's great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say that's going to wrap us up for our first section about general process and strategy development. Let's move into a little bit more of a season-specific direction now. So let's talk a little bit about Hatboro Horsham gameplay. Bob, I think you made a great point. Really all we have to go off of right now is week one. And unfortunately, we're kind of limited on our sample size in terms of how this game can be played and how it's going to evolve. But that being said, let's talk about your reflections on this season so far and how you experienced it. So let's talk about something a little bit more, hands-on practical, right? Let's talk about visibility. That's a big question. My team worked a lot with the VR system and we tried our best to kind of visualize it. But one interesting thing about this field is not a lot of things are 90 degrees off of each other. It's not like a nice clean grid. And there's a lot of obstructions and a lot of interesting, caveats to this game field in terms of its layout. How did you guys feel in terms of, vision in the booth, in the driver's station? How did that go?
I think it was pretty obvious as soon as you mentioned 90 degrees. Yeah, because those 3 driver stations are spread out with opposing alliance activity, or at least your human player and opposing alliance goal in between those, it did make for sight lines throughout the field a little bit more difficult. Normally, there are things on the first field in a game each year that are blocked, but this one offered, as you said, a little bit off of a perpendicular view, and prepare for that. Matter of fact, you did certain things depending in a match, depending on what operator station you were in.
Absolutely. How would you say the visibility compared to the 2019 game, which, with the cargo ship, there were tons of blind spots and things like that?
I'll jump in. I would say that the field was a little bit more open, cross field from end to end, so you could actually see pretty well if there were balls accumulating, because maybe your team was doing especially well shooting them into the goal. So you could, and like as a drive coach, is something to point out, hey, we have a little bit of a cycle going on down at that side. Stay down there, pick up the balls. But outside of that, the biggest visibility issues really had to do with kind of the switch being in the middle, the generator switch being in the middle of it too. In Storm, we made our 3D printed field, and instead of doing the VR, we like creeped it down behind the driver station on the 3D printed field to like see what it looked like and to put like a robot around there. And we were actually happier to see how open the field was compared to that, aside from not being able to communicate really all that well with your fellow alliance members. That's where the goal really started to kind of get in the way.
How did you guys come around that challenge with, the gap in communication? Lots of suicides, coaches pretty active?
I think the biggest thing was that third alliance member who was kind of off on the other side over there. You really trusted them to kind of fill their role, from having had a strategy meeting, they're kind of talking to them. And also as a coach, you walk back and forth and you kind of talk to everyone, see how things are going based on what's coming up next in the match.
Coaches got their steps in this game.
Yeah.
Back and from side to side.
There you go. Did you guys notice any patterns in terms of, team performance, depending on where they were? Like Bob, you talked about how sometimes driver station location would dictate what your team tried to accomplish in a match. Is that something any of you guys noticed with other teams? And if so, how did you utilize that information?
Yeah, most definitely. So trying to break up a match into autonomous and teleop, and then in the context of a first game and end game segments. In autonomous, the driver station didn't really much matter, except the first thing you do after autonomous. You want to make sure you've got a good sight of your robot and where you're planning to go. Because if you've got to figure it out after autonomous is over, you're losing teleop seconds, valuable teleop scoring seconds. So although it wasn't overly important in autonomous, it was important. As far as autonomous goes, teams that have some versatility in their autonomous routines can really be complementary to their alliance partners. Being able to set up your robot in multiple positions and still score can be a very valuable, not just in qualification matches, but when it comes down to selecting elimination partners. Knowing what your potential alliance partners have as far as auto routines can be very beneficial.
Makes sense. Nate, anything to chime in with in terms of autonomous flexibility?
Yeah, that pre-match discussion with your alliance members was actually pretty huge here, because with the field being so open in front of your scoring area, you really could place your robot in a number of positions. And that actually is something that I think is exciting looking ahead to how this game could evolve. And I know we'll talk about that later, but you had to go over that with your alliance members ahead of time. And in a week 1 event, most people were just kind of setting up in front of the goal and shooting straight, shoot 3 and get off the line. So it was pretty straightforward, but even as the competition moved a little bit, you started to see some evolution of that part of the game.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's an interesting layout, and I give props to the game design committee for throwing such a curveball at us in terms of field layout. Something I haven't heard you guys talk about at all in terms of sight lines and visibility and practicality from behind the glass is the end game, right? So we talked a lot about autonomous and shooting and what we're going to do coming out of autonomous, but could you guys reflect a little bit on the challenges this field presented in terms of successfully executing an end game with 2 other machines and then 3 more machines that you're not supposed to touch, but they're trying to operate and do the exact same thing right next to you? So what was that like?
I would say timing was huge. So kind of getting to the point, finishing up a cycle if you had one that you could still do, and then making sure that there was enough space for you to get over to the generator switch to do the chin up. And then also from there, if you're really trying to, balance, making sure you get into the right spot with your alliance members. I remember Storm had a match with Mo, and our robot, they had too much breakfast, at one point there in the morning, and we were a little bit too over to the side, and we ran out of time and we didn't get the balance. But a few robots did get the hang. So timing, and then also with that, just not touching the other people around you. I know that was just tricky, and I know like parking wasn't as big. I think I know Mike has some experience with that.
Yeah, to bump in, I know hanging was important. One of the kind of things we kind of underestimated was the hanging and the points there. We didn't have enough weight for our hanger to get on at this competition, but it was the #1 priority going after that competition. Like, the hanger's going on, but it was tricky towards, I think one of our matches we were going to park underneath our alliance partners, and our bumpers were right on the edge of our zone, and another team was on the edge of their zone, and contact was made, and the refs have a tough job there. So there was a penalty called, and it was definitely, it's tough to see, and especially towards the end when it's like, oh, we need to get back, and 5 seconds left, or our driver's a little jittery, but it's slowing down and just popping over that first bump and getting in the park zone is kind of important.
Yeah. Once again, week 1 is a learning experience for everybody. And specifically hanging this event, what we found was talking with your alliance partners beforehand and almost choreographing where you're going to go, when you're going to go. 3, 2, 1, climb. There's yelling behind the OI station. Everybody positioned, everybody ready, go. I think a lot different than what you might see in a week 7 event, where everybody knows exactly what to do, what they want to do, how their robot can respond, even up against an uneven bar.
Yeah, and I just want to add one other comment, that something that a lot of us didn't think about when it came to endgame was the posts of the generator switch. Those things are big, and it creates a whole new kind of challenge as to how to get into that zone. I saw a lot of people smashing into the thing while they're trying to go park or trying to get in a position to hang. It's something that a lot of teams kind of in that heat of the moment kind of miss. It's a challenge.
Maybe one final thing on hanging, positioning wise, we talked about where you were lining up, what OI station you were. That actually many times determined where on the bar you were going to hang with your alliance partners. Because if you were on the far side, you wanted to be hanging on the bar where you had a better sight line than if you were on the opposite side of the field.
So I guess unanimously, you guys agree, like the best approach to end game execution is to have a plan before you even start the match versus saying, we're going to go in the middle maybe, or we'll go far. It seems like you got to have, a pretty well orchestrated approach before you even, power the robots up. So that's good to know moving forward for sure. Chris, I'd love to hear your thoughts on alliance composition. What makes a good alliance and how do you utilize them the best?
Well, to segue into the two, actually, I kind of want to put another comment here. One of the things that we always see when it comes to endgame is sometimes in previous games, robots might try to pinch off that last shot or empty that last load of balls, but our robot didn't have a climbing mechanism for our first event. And we found that rather than try to go and get those 5 climbing points, we would continue the score for those last 30 seconds, kind of stay out of the way. Offloading a hopper full of power cells was more than the 5 points that we would have gotten. And the 5 points would not have made a difference between getting a ranking point and not. So the way that we looked at it is that this is a neat game because even, not every robot has to participate in that end game in order to make it worthwhile. So yeah. So as you asked, we're talking about alliance members. One of the things that's also neat about this game is because of how balls get entered into the field because of the limit that you can store behind the driver station. It kind of sets up some natural lanes, and some alliances are able to participate, like in the trench lane. Some they run a lane up the rendezvous point. Others, they don't even go down the lane. They wait for the balls. They say if we're going to pound the opponent's goal with power cells, they're going to have to start feeding them out, and they're going to be loading all up in the front of the field, in which we can scoop them all up and put them back out there. So one of the things that I thought was important was, when we set up that match, understanding the strengths of your alliance partners, as well as how you think your opponents are going to play. There are natural zones that other robots are going to gravitate to. We were a low robot. So, we found that just going from the loading station straight up and firing from the trench, we would stay out of everybody else's way. And that created one lane, one zone. And we had also some good defense bots in quarterfinal. In our quarterfinal match, we were against Team 423, the Simple Machines, and they actually had a big wall in front, and they were able to try to park up in front and try to stop us from shooting from the edge of the trench. But we had a stronger drivetrain, so we threatened to push them up into the low goal and get penalties, and so that kind of made them back off a bit. So it was pretty cool.
And we found Mo found that quite beneficial, was collecting balls in that offensive zone right in front of the goal. We were a high goal shooter, and if you get the ball out of the rendezvous, get the balls in some pieces of the trench, by that time, your alliance partners have already scored enough where your opposing alliance has to be dumping balls out on the field. And we would just make a plan to just keep stealing balls as they had to bring them out.
Forcing that overload and maximizing your benefits, right?
Save time. You don't have to run downfield to get fuel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess kind of to add to what Bob said, like that front zone there, that is, and what Chris was talking about earlier, that's kind of its own lane by itself. So that's the second zone where, you could have a robot just work the whole entire match. So you have the trench, you have that front offensive zone, and then you have the back area of the field where your alliance station is. And a lot of people tried to have a robot that might have been a full court kind of shooter. That ended Storm. We designed something like that. We thought that we could pull that off, but the balls and kind of the way the field, I don't know, maybe there was a drift. There's always wind going through these gyms on the first day of competitions that mess up your shots. But it ended up not working out that way. But what did end up working for that was the ability to feed balls up to the front of the field for a Mo type bot to kind of just clean up the mess and to go ahead and shoot the balls up into the goal from there. I don't think a lot of defense was initially played at Hatboro. I think that most teams took an offense first approach to planning their matches. And this goes back to strategy and scouting, where like going into a match meeting, we would know on average how many balls our opponents would score. And then you add that up across your alliance and the opposing alliance, you know, it might be close, you know, it might be easy. So then you kind of decide, okay, just go play your game. And a lot of teams generally want to do that, especially in a week one where they've built robots that are capable or should be capable of shooting balls. And, you know, the more practice, the better for everyone.
Absolutely. Mike, I'd love to hear your input. So they talked a little bit earlier about lanes and a lot of interesting scoring opportunities that would arise in the match, you know, as the match progressed from the start all the way to the end. What are your thoughts on, you know, ball loading and also on low bots? Where do you see those?
With the ball loading, trying to find the balls on the field, and it came down to visibility was a little bit issue for us, at least in the beginning, with the color wheel. The color wheel hit a couple balls from us. You know, it can hide it in that lane if you didn't have anything, you know, if you weren't aware of it. I know we did some video review and people in the stands were like, see, there's the, you know, the balls are right on that in the trench. Why didn't you pick them up? And like, we couldn't see them. But it was a little tricky. I know with our intake, we run over the balls and then back up, and then it would kind of compress the balls a little bit, and that would kind of come into our robot a lot easier. They were, you know, it was a tricky game piece this year that it didn't really it didn't stick. It's just easy to run over. It wasn't easy to kind of pick up, but low bots. There was a couple of them at Hatboro to see. I know we were paired with one fresh 1811. You know, when we in our alliance, they went to more of the defense bot, but it could work. I see future. If in future weeks, I think it would have been a good thing, a good part to the strat or to your alliance. If you have somebody that's shooting from the DJ booth or the color wheel, somebody shooting from the trench, and then somebody up close. If nobody's taking that, you know, up close shot, I think a low bot would be good to the, you know, good for the alliance if it's all offensive. I know one thing I noticed was as soon as you start shooting a lot of balls into the goal, kind of puts a target on you. And I know in one of the matches we were against Storm and Nate, and we were trying to load balls on the opposite side of the field, and one of our alliance partners just wasn't working, and Nate decided to take advantage of that and block us out of trying to, you know, because it's a limited space in with that you know, in the trust system.
Full disclosure, we had a little bit of a ball jam in our elevator. So we had nothing else better to do at that point other than to go over to the other side of the field. And because we know that you couldn't run the trench, you're a high bot. Yeah. And so we utilized, we knew that. And we also had our friend, the generator switch post in front of us also. So like with that and having a good drive base, you can easily cut off that lane to get for a tall bot to get from one side of the field to the other.
Nate, don't worry. You don't have to justify playing a good defensive game. There is no shame in that.
There was no hard feelings about that. It was just impressive that, like, it's just like, I can't get around him. I can't get around him because, you know, our driver couldn't get around him because there was, you know, a robot's width or a robot in half width, and Storm was in that width, and no way we could get around it.
And because it was the end, I think it was getting close to the end of the match, you get into some really, really crazy penalties with the generator switch and then game starting. So it's,
yeah.
You want to avoid that.
And you don't want to go too far over to start being in the, you know, kind of the blue alliance, at least in this case, their trench, and then get penalties there. So it was kind of that risk factor. Yeah.
The thing about first games is when something breaks on your robot, you can, as long as you're drivable, you can always play defense.
There you go. Words to live by for sure. So last thing before we move on to section 3, talking about the future of this game, question I have for you guys is, can I get your reflections on the differences between qualifications and playoffs in Infinite Recharge?
Oh man, it is it's intense. I mean, I think qualifications eliminations in any game are intense, but that's when you see some of the more subtle points making a big difference, right? Like in semifinal match number 2, when we were actually we were partnered with Storm and we were up against Mo, and it literally, the match hung in the balance at the end there, where we didn't get the balance and they did, and so we lost by 8 points that match. But yeah, it's really all about pounding the goal and maximizing those points at the end. I mean, and I guess that's true in any game, but because there is no significant benefit to those ranking points, obviously they don't exist in eliminations. It's really just about pounding the goal and getting that balance, because those 50 are going to make a big impact.
I would also add it's about setting the lanes and the scoring zones for different members of your alliance too. Because staying out of each other's way, because everybody in a week 1 event, there was very little defense. Everyone was just it's a cycling game. So everyone was trying to find the game pieces, score them as fast as they can within the areas that they were set up to play in, usually within an alliance.
Bob, any thoughts about?
Yeah. Just as far as Chris talked about nailing that goal. Well, this year's games, there were three ways actually to nail that goal: right low, the big opening up top, or the small opening up top. And many teams, I think, found very early on that the accuracy required for that small 3-pointer goal just wasn't worth it versus the volume that you could attain getting the 2-pointers. And so we quickly learned at that first event, just get balls and pump them in there. There weren't too many that bounced out. Yeah, there were occurrences that they came out, but just getting them in the goal, and by chance you got some 3-pointers, great, all about it.
But I'll just add also to that, as a coach, if you're seeing that there is no defense in front of that goal, go try to take that front shot right in front of it to see if you can get that 3-point shot. Like that was another job of the drive coach on our team, take the easy shot.
Nice. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I agree with what you said earlier, Chris. Most of the time, elimination rounds get crazier, right? That's when the results start to really hold some weight, or at least more so. And it gets a lot more intense and a lot more exciting. Okay, so let's move on to section 3. Moving forward, talking a little bit about where we see the future of this game going, especially now that First has made the official announcement that we're going to have a replay. They have said that there are going to be some changes. We don't know to what degree, but at the very least, it'll be entertaining to at least speculate a little bit. But before we move into that, let's talk a little bit about how the season play is going to evolve. As we get the opportunity to play more than 1 week of Infinite Recharge, how do you guys see this game or the gameplay in this game evolving as we move through week 3, week 4, week 5, Worlds? How do you guys see that improving like any other game would?
I would definitely suggest that the control panel, as teams get more comfortable navigating the field, collecting balls, honing their bot and their drive teams to carry out match sequences, the control panel will come more into play, even maybe challenging the expense of hanging, leaving, let's say, to hang at 30 seconds, which was typically 30, 35, some teams 40, some teams cheated maybe down to 25. make sure you got that hang in, especially if there's a ranking point in the balance. But the control panel in week 1 was not used much at all. There were a couple attempts on it. I think maybe there was maybe 1 or 2 successes. But I would definitely see the control panel, if the game stays as is, becoming more part of, especially that latter part of teleop period, where teams will begin to coordinate. I think week 1, everybody's trying to demonstrate, hey, is our bot working as designed? Can we depend on it? Can we depend on our partners? I think as weeks progressed, or if they had progressed, or even if rules remain the same next year, teams will coordinate use of that control panel, whereby one team may go work the control panel while the other 2 teams, or at least one bot, continues to collect ball and wait for that control panel to get into sequence to fire their additional shots.
I think that's true. The only thing I would wonder is week 3 and on, how would teams compare if, like, us, the mentors on here, the draft coaches on here, going into their next competition, having an idea of how the game is played, having, some things dialed in, compared to a team that just, is starting out week 3, week 4, week 5, can they learn, how's their learning curve to this game? Is it going to be fairly easy, or is it going to be steep, and, kind of learning how to, navigate the field, really, compared to just playing with the robot and testing it at your school and not having a kind of real world conditions. And, it would be interesting to see how that would play out. But I think just more shooting and everybody hanging to be reliable on. So that color wheel would come into play to kind of be the differential there. I know that game, that was like similar with the gears back in Steamworks, where everybody could get three rotors going, and then it came down to fuel for the first time, week 3. So something maybe similar here.
Mm-hmm. To kind of add to how it would evolve, what's usually the last part of everyone's robot or last subgroup of students that gets to work on the robot?
Programming.
Usually it's programming, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Those auto modes. So like the week 1 auto modes of plop the robot on the field, aim it before you walk away, shoot, and then have it drive off the line. That, I think that will go in many different directions. I would even venture to say that at a Mar Champs kind of first Mid-Atlantic Champs situation, you would see none of the power cells on the ground at the end of autonomous mode. Okay, because there's all those options on the field. The programmers have had their chance to get autonomous modes practiced, and even going into this next year, if they don't change the layout maybe of those cells on the ground, we might see more of that too.
I think you'd also see a lot of, even in teleop, a lot of better tuned shooting, right? So you'll see more rapid fire, more accurate shooting for sure. We did see, I was pretty impressed with how good the shooters were at APRO, but I know that they're going to tune it in. They're going to get it faster. We had some plans on increasing the speed of our shooters. So yeah, I think that you're going to see a lot more high volume scoring. It's going to get a lot faster paced.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris, let me ask you, one of the, I guess, more highly contested topics online, Chief Delphi and whatnot, is how people feel about the replay of the game and the potential changes to infinite recharge. What's your opinion on that? I feel like you have a really interesting perspective on this.
Well, listen, when I think of FIRST, right, FIRST is about, bringing out the best in kids and bringing out and inspiring that engineering design process. And this year, what was really neat was, without bag day, teams were able to kind of spend a little bit more time to iterate their process. What's kind of neat for this coming year is that they're going to continue to be able to iterate their process. If they found that their shooter wasn't working well, maybe they're going to go through and rebuild or redesign their shooter. And even though they're going to be bringing in a lot of new members, even though they're going to be losing some of their seniors, they're still going to have that opportunity to take what they have and improve upon it. And that's really one of the things that we don't normally get to see in first. Normally we're kind of limited to that 6-week window, and what you got is what you got, and maybe we can get some parts built in between. But now we really get to iterate, and I think that that is something that first has needed. And so I think that this is going to be a really neat opportunity for a lot of kids to learn how to improve on what they already have.
I agree with that. The only one thing, and it's, you know, because it's like, oh, we have from now until, you know, week 6 of build season next year to work on the robot. And it's a lot of time. I think it's going to be difficult. And I think time management is going to be very important, because I know with this, you know, no bag, we were finishing up things on the robot last minute. You know, we thought we had plenty of time, but it's like, oh wow, HAPRO is right around the corner. So I think time management and going with how much you actually want to, you know, do you want to take the more kind of elite teams out there, take their designs and try and copy that, or make it your own design, or do you stick to what you have and what works for you and just try to improve different subsections or sub-mechanical devices on your robot? Will that, or how will teams take that direction? I know at least for us was, one of the students was like, oh, I've been working on this design, here's this, and it's this whole complicated, this whole new complicated design and rotary hopper and everything. And it was like, oh, that's awesome. But the one thing worrying is taking that design, how are we going to implement it and make sure all the fine details that come through the design process are worked out, so it's not failing on the field, but you got all those down. So it'll be interesting to see who changes dramatically and who kind of stays the same and just kind of perfects what they got. So it'll be real cool to see.
Mike, I'm going to come out of left field here.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that you may not want to build a whole new robot, but maybe all those designs that you have on paper aren't usable anymore, because FIRST is going to change the game substantially. Now, I'm just going to, just get the juice here.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
What would happen? What would happen if teleop and auto were reversed?
Oh.
Started in teleop. The only thing is you're hanging from the switch. You got to get off the switch. You got to play a teleop period. At the end of the period, you got to get into a position that you want to be in so that it flips to autonomous, and maybe you work the control panel and your partners fire balls in. Different game. Maybe you can use pieces of the robot. Maybe you can't.
Oh yeah.
Or what happens if FIRST decided, you know what, we're going to highlight the control panel more. Saw week 1, a lot of teams weren't using control panel. We're going to create an end game battle at the control panel. There's no such thing as separate red and blue trenches. 2 bots from each opposing alliance go to each side of the control panel and try to align it to their color for a multiplier. That's the end. The other bot can go hang, or the 2 bots can go hang.
That is awesome.
Or here's another one. 5 gold balls drop from the switch. Undetermined period in the match. And they're multiplier balls, and depending upon who gets the majority of those 5 balls, the alliance that gets the majority of those 5 balls gets a multiplier on their score. So that might change the strategy inside a game. 1, you don't know when it's going to happen. 2, you might forego the control panel and hang because you've got 3 of the 5 gold balls, which means you get a multiplier.
Jeez, that's lunacy, Bob.
Just coming out of left field there.
Well, what was the other thing? What if they changed the carpet to lunacy?
Yeah, regular.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe let the human players toss the balls across the field. Why not, right? That was a fun element that unfortunately hasn't been an element in games recently, where the human players were a factor in scoring, directly.
Well, the Frisbees, if you remember in Ultimate Ascent, yeah.
It's a while back now, though, Chris.
I was gonna.
I'll throw one more out. This isn't necessarily bot related.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
But it's alliance related. So right now, many of us don't have access to our workrooms, our labs, our robot, students can gather. We don't know what's going to end. We don't know what kind of season, what build season we might be able to have. So what if come January, the announced game was that as part of the game announcement, maybe it stays the same, but you are randomly assigned 2 alliance partners in January. And your build season, your challenge is to figure out how to best optimize your robots to compete in last year's game as an alliance through the season. Now, maybe you can only do that in districts because you need to be partnered, at least somebody, I would think, that's reasonably geographically close to you. But first would assign the alliances in January. So now you gotta cooperate. Cooperation comes back into the play here as to how you can make 3 robots, 3 drive teams, 3 successful operations to execute out on the field.
I just thought of one. What if you had to, kind of like in, was it 2012 with the cooperation bridge? You had to hang on the switch with the other alliance on your side of the field to get like ranking points.
Well, I was going to say, I liked the idea that Bob had is maybe everybody starts in the rendezvous point, because in the FTC game last year, you could start on the lander, go down, play the match, and then pull yourself back up on the lander. So that was kind of cool. I personally think they first will probably recognize that there was probably something imbalanced with the way that the control panel scoring worked. I think that there were too many power cells required, or maybe they won't require that you spin a disc until, well, they may do like just 15 and then maybe fewer power cells in the beginning and then more for the end, like maybe do like 15 and 25 or something, or maybe they'll change the mechanism altogether and change that whole trench row. I'm not obviously sure. I mean, we're speculating, but I think that was obviously an underutilized part of the game. The only time that it was used that I remember in Hatboro Horsham, they realized that it wasn't actually functioning properly when we had like a 2-hour field delay to get it going again.
Yeah. Well, I kind of agree that like the control panel would be more used if we kept playing, but I also think that because this is an engineering robotics competition, first may or might want to introduce some kind of new engineering challenge with this. So, we know the field is modular. We know things can move on and off of it. It comes off a truck. You can put it together. I have a feeling like maybe that control panel might just disappear, and they might create a little bit of a challenge for us to modify our robots or add something the same way many of our color wheel kind of mechanisms were added. We just put it on the outside of the robot and drove up to it. Maybe they might do something like that, or maybe they might do something with the cells also, put them into a different part of the field. Have something more in the middle, kind of like the hippos. What's the happy hippos? Maybe they're
hungry hippos.
Hungry hippos, right?
You need kids.
Sorry.
Jeez, Nate, come on.
Exactly. We do need kids with this.
All right.
Let the kids decide.
Yeah. There you go.
I agree.
All right. Well, I think that's going to about do it for our coaches panel tonight. Guys, I want to thank Nate Knaus, Bob Dudek, Mike Leicht, and Chris Gregory. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time tonight to talk with us. Really appreciate the perspectives, and looking forward to see you guys out on the field in 2021. And with that, I want to say a huge thank you to our entire FMA Plus crew for making this happen. We couldn't have done it without the whole group screening, interviewing, and coordinating this broadcast, as well as moderating chat, coordinating social media, and keeping you informed. And finally, I'll have to say it. We'll see you guys next Saturday for another awesome episode of FMA Plus. Have a great night, everybody, and see everybody soon.